Well, in this program, we'll talk about what Azure Sentinel is and what are the key features of Azure Sentinel and how we can onboard and manage this cloud service. So we need to understand, first of all, that what a SIEM tool does. And actually, the Azure Sentinel is a SIEM tool, and SIEM is a combination of SIM and SAM, security information management, and the security event management are the two different things. And when we combine them, the information management and the event management, so it becomes SIEM. Azure Sentinel is a cloud native tool, cloud native service that is a SIEM tool, and this tool helps you in real-time visibility across any organization and organization's information security systems. We can aggregate the data. We can collect the data from different networks, from the different domains, and we can keep an eye on that. So this is a bird's eye on the network infrastructure and the applications, and any type of anomalous activities can be detected and can be resulted into the alerts or the incidents. So that is what a SIEM tool does, and the Sentinel also is made for. We have many tools in the market out there that are the SIEM tools. These tools can be the logarithm you might have worked with, or Splunk, or ArcSight, or Sumo Logic, IBM's QRadar. So there are several tools in the market. Event log management that consolidates data from numerous sources. We collect the data from different sources and we collect it and store it into one location in these SIEM tools, and then we process these logs based on the organizational policies. We can monitor this data. We also can visualize this data in these SIEM tools. We also can automatically respond to the incidents, and that makes it a SOAR tool. So we also can call it a security orchestration and automated response tool. So this does the orchestration as well. That can be including notifying the security engineers to about a incident, or it can be to remediate from any kind of malicious actions. Moving further, the Azure Sentinel, since it's a cloud service, so it saves lots of time when onboarding this service, because most of the time the organizations spend 70%, 80% of time into managing the infrastructure for the SIEM tools to install and manage. Whereas since it's a cloud native service, so we can onboard this service, and at a cloud scale, we can ingest the data from different sources, and then we can process that data. So we can focus 100% on incident management rather managing the underlying infrastructure. This data can be collected not only from Azure, but from any cloud or on-premises data centers. We have dozens of connectors available. 98 connectors till date we have available, and many more will be available shortly. So these connectors let you collect the logs from the different networks, from the different sources, and then we can process this data. Azure Sentinel has these key capabilities as collecting the data at cloud scale and storing this data. You get 90% of data retention completely free, which you need not to pay. If you extend the retention more than 90 days, then you need to pay for that. Detect the previously undetected threats by doing the threat hunting. You can proactively hunt for the threats in your network. Investigate threats with artificial intelligence and the machine learning. Respond to incident rapidly, so you can respond that with the orchestration services allows you to create the playbooks that can be triggered on an incident. So if an incident occurs, you can automatically remediate that. The Azure Sentinel comes with tons of connectors, like I said earlier. Some of the main connectors including Microsoft Threat Protection Solutions, Microsoft 365 sources, including the Office 365 applications, formerly known as Office 365, today Microsoft 365 applications, Azure Active Directory, Azure ATP, the Windows or Linux servers that you're running in on-premises or any security services, including the appliances like firewalls, Microsoft Cloud App Security, and many more. So there are some built-in connectors that we have available. And to extend the data collection, we have agent-based options or API connection-based uh, solutions available. So we can connect to the third-party services with the help of APIs and ingest the data, or we can read any logs, any custom logs produced by an application or a script with the help of an agent that we will see in a while. The key features of Azure Sentinel are analytics rules we can create that helps you to put the organizational compliance in place. You can create your own analytics rules at the scheduled queries, or you can also bring your own machine learning, and based on that, you can detect the threats and you can resolve them into the incidents and you can investigate those incidents. It reduces the noise and minimizes the number of alerts you review and investigate. We also have the options of workbooks. We can create the workbooks to monitor the data that is collected and ingested into the Azure Sentinel. So we can work with these workbooks to get the insight of the data and visualize that data according to our requirement. We have many built-in templates, or we can create new workbooks. Security automation and orchestration. Like I said earlier, that Azure Sentinel is not only a SIEM tool, it is a SOAR tool as well. So it is also used for orchestration. It leverages the existing Azure Logic App Engine, and using the Azure Logic apps, it provides the integration with Microsoft or third-party applications and let you orchestrate uh, with Sentinel. You can trigger these logic apps, or also known as Sentinel playbooks, when an incident is generated. Investigation, we also can investigate these incidents once an incident is generated. So we can get the answer of the questions like what are the different entities which are impacted with that incident, what can be the potential security threat. So we can see these and we can do the RCA into that incident. We also do the threat hunting based on the MITRE framework. We can implement this framework to do the threat hunting proactively, and based on the MITRE framework tactics, we can uh, create the hunting rules and we can implement this framework. Whereas we also have the community. So a GitHub community is available where Microsoft security analysts have placed lots of hunting queries, analytics rules, or the playbooks. You can use them, or you can also participate into that and share your knowledge or your experience that you have invested in with others. Azure Sentinel works with analytics agent. This analytics agent is known as Microsoft Monitoring Agent, MMA, or also known as Log Analytics Agent. This agent can be installed on a Windows or a Linux machine, where from the data can be collected. Once the data is collected, then this data can be processed by Sentinel. If we look into a full-fledged diagram of the log analytics agent, how it collects the data. So let's have a look into this diagram. In the diagram, you will notice that there is a log analytics workspace where the data is ingested. This data is ingested for 30 days. 30 days retention is free, absolutely free, and maximum 2 years. But if you onboard Sentinel on top of that, so you get 90 days data retention free. This data can be collected with service to service integration like Azure services. For instance, Azure platform logs, logs of different types from Azure, like activity logs coming from the control plane, or the diagnostic logs, or the Azure AD logs, can be ingested into this workspace directly without an agent installed. Whereas if you have on-premises data center or any cloud where your Windows or Linux servers are running, so you can install an agent called Microsoft Monitoring Agent or a Log Analytics agent, and you can connect this agent directly to the Log Analytics workspace over the 443 HTTPS. It will send this data to the Log Analytics agent, Log Analytics service directly. This is known as a direct agent installation. We also have an option, the installation through SCOM. So this agent is nothing but a SCOM agent. So this can report to a SCOM server. If you already have System Center Operations Manager, so you can send this data to the SCOM server, and SCOM can be integrated with Log Analytics workspace. We also have Log Analytics Gateway. The gateway helps you to connect those servers which are offline, which do not have any internet access, and this can act as a reverse proxy and can connect your uh, servers to the Log Analytics workspace to send the data. Whereas if you have some appliances, for example, you have Palo Alto or any other firewall, Checkpoint or F5, so you can include, or you can do the forwarding, event forwarding to the syslog servers, the Linux servers where the agent is installed, because the agent installation on the appliance is not possible or is not supported. So you can forward these events from this appliance to the syslog servers or the Windows agents, whatever is supported by the appliance. So do this forwarding to this server, and then the logs can be ingested into the workspace. This log analytics agent can read literally a text file also for the custom logs produced by any application or a script. You also can use the services like Azure Data Explorer. You can collect the data from any type of files, whether it be the CSV file or XML, JSON, or any kind of file. So those solutions are also available. Overall, we have several ways to collect this data from the network and ingest this data into this log analytics workspace. On top of this workspace, this is Sentinel, which sits on top of it, and the data collected by it is detected through the analytics rules, is investigated, and then is also responded with the help of playbooks. So Azure Sentinel solution need a workspace. You can use the existing log analytics workspace if you have, or you can create a new workspace. So onboarding process of Sentinel is quite straightforward. All you need is a log analytics workspace, and that's it. For an instance, if I want to use Sentinel, so I go to the Azure portal and select Azure Sentinel. And when I create an Azure Sentinel, so there are two options, that I want to use an existing workspace or I want to create a new log analytics workspace. If I have an existing log analytics workspace, I can pick that, or I can create a new one. I go with my existing Sentinel solution, which is onboarded into a workspace. If you want to manage the settings of that workspace, so you can go to the settings blade and you can manage that workspace from there. You will see the workspace settings where the data is ingested, and you can see the agent management, where from you can download the agent for Windows or Linux machines, Windows or Linux servers, and you can install this agent. The installation guide is provided. So download the agent and then register that agent after installation with this workspace ID and the key. If the server is offline, you can download the log analytics gateway to send the logs to this workspace. You also can set the workspace settings for usage and estimated cost, and you can configure the data retention, which can be maximum 2 years. So you can use the slider to move the, you can move the slider to the appropriate number of days that you want to retain the data. It is configured by default for 30 days. Once the Sentinel is onboarded and the workspace settings are configured, so you can use data connectors to connect the different data sources. These data connectors are available for Microsoft and third-party services. We have 98 connectors available today. So Microsoft is aggressively working on this and adding more and more connectors. And hearing you, you also can give your guides and feedbacks you can go through. So here are the connectors, and I have 5 connectors connected, and there is 0 in the pipeline right now. I also have the criterion filters that I can filter for these data connectors. You will see the different data connectors, and the process of connecting to a data connector will vary. So it depends on what connector you choose. So if you select a connector and you open the connector page, so it gives a brief of the connector, what this connector is all about, and how to connect to that. So the instructions are given over here. So whether you qualify the prerequisites for this connector, yes or no, that is being shown over here. And then you define that what type of logs of the Azure Active Directory you want to collect. You can choose that, and then you can apply changes, and that's it. So this was a quite straightforward installation of a connector, or connecting the Azure Active Directory logs with the Sentinel. Same is with other Azure services like Azure Activity or Identity Protection or DDoS Protection or Defender. For an instance, I want to collect the logs from a different device, that is maybe a checkpoint firewall or Cisco ASA, Meraki, UCS. So then I open the connector page and it guides you on the instructions how you can connect that. So this shows you how you can connect the data source. So you need to prepare a Linux server, syslog server, and then you need to enable the event forwarding. How you do that? So the guide is provided. You will see the reference links over here, how you export the logs from the checkpoint. So the settings are shown over there. So connecting the data connectors to collect the logs from different data sources is quite straightforward. You can select the connector and then open the connector page, and then you can connect it. The data ingested into this workspace can be seen over here under the overview blade, where you can see on the dashboard that how many events been sent to this over the time. Over the last 24 hours, these are the events. The 2 alerts are also there, and the incidents that you see. So whatever the data is ingested into Sentinel, that can be seen over here, and you can directly go to the alerts if there is any. So you can see these alerts on the right side over here, and you can click on those buttons. So the data is visualized over here. So this is the process of connecting the different data connectors and collecting the data from different sources. Once you have collected the data into this workspace, you can query that data with a query language, that is custom query language. This custom query language is a analytics query language and is used to make the read-only requests to collect the data, and then you can visualize that data, or you can collect the appropriate information by doing the filter or sort or measure or different operations. So analytical jobs are based on this query language. So a powerful query language allows you to join data from multiple tables as well. So you can aggregate the data from different sources as well and perform the complex operations with minimal code. The language is the custom query. You make these read-only requests to process this data that is collected into the Sentinel. You can go to the log search in Sentinel workspace, and then you can run a Sentinel query to collect this data. So it gives you a guide on the query. So I will close this window, and I can query the data from any table. For an instance, I want to collect the data from a table that is for audit logs. So I can run that query. Any results in the last 24 hours from the Azure AD audit logs? I don't have anything. I can define the time frame either in the query, that I want to see the data from what time. So that can be in query. I have not set that. or you can do it custom, or time range syntax you can specify. So these are the records. 9 records are found in the last 7 days related to the audit logs. Once you have collected this data, you can perform the analytics jobs on this data. So you can pipe this data and you can perform some operations. For an instance, on the audit logs, I want to see this data aggregated by some specific attribute. For example, based on the results, how many success results or how many failure results are there. So I can summarize this data and I count this data by its result. So it will summarize this information when I run this query, and I can see the data that how many success or failed, if there is anything, that will be shown over here. You also can render this output. Default output is the table view. You can also list that as well, or you can visualize this data. For an instance, you want to render that into a area chart, bar chart, column chart. So what type of view you need, you can choose that, and then you can run it. So you will see the data according to the rendering you have selected. So that is the job of this query language, that you can collect and visualize or enrich this data, whatever the data you want to collect. Now the analytics rules are created on top of this data based on this query language. So you have the option to create a scheduled query that runs on a defined schedule. And in this analytics rule, we define the query in the custom query. So this custom query will define the rule logic. You will type in that query over here, and based on that, you can create the rules. Data connection methods, we have service to service integration, the first method. So we can integrate the other services and we can collect the data. So this is without an agent, and you integrate the two services together. Some of the examples are like AWS, CloudTrail, Azure Activity, Azure AD, Identity Protection, Advanced Threat Protection. In fact, I've shown you a few of them like Azure Activity or Azure Active Directory that were connected. Another option is for the external solutions via API tokens or API connections or service connections, endpoints, whatever the fancy term you use for that. So you make overall an API connection. So with external solutions, you can make an API connection and you can collect the logs. That can be the different Barracuda or Forcepoint F5 big IP firewalls you have. So you can collect the data by connecting to them using the API connections. You authorize with the help of an API token or known as API key. So API integrations are also possible. Another option is that you can collect the data with the help of agent. So you can either install the agent on the appliance directly if supported. If not, then you can configure a Windows or Linux server and have the agent installed on that machine. And then you can configure this agent to collect the data. So some of the solutions are AI, Vectra, Detect, Checkpoint, Cisco ASA, F5, Fortinet, or Microsoft security events or the Windows firewall logs you want to work with. So these are the different solutions available: DLP solutions, threat intelligence providers, DNS machines, Linux servers, and many more options. This is about the analytics rules. I shown you one of the analytics rule creation wizard where you can create the rule and you can process that rule based on a schedule. So the query will execute on the defined interval, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, each day, weekly, monthly, how you want to run that. So you define that and the rule runs and scans the data according to the query in it. Once the data is scanned and if some results are found, some traces are found, so we call them events. So based on those events, we can generate the alerts. We have the option that for each event, we want to generate one alert, or for multiple events, which are same actually. So we want the single alert. Based on that, alert, we also can trigger that into incidents. And the same logic, based on each alert, we can create an incident, or based on multiple alerts, we can create a single alert, a single incident. So that is applicable to the incidents as well. So events make the alerts, alerts make the incidents. There are a few templates that we can use. For example, Microsoft Security. So you need not to always create these rules from scratch. There are several templates available. You can pick those templates to create these analytics rules. So Microsoft security analysts have created lots of templates for you. You can go to the rule template. You might have noticed when you configure the data connector, so it shows you that how many analytics rules it gives you. You also can filter them by these criterion filters. For example, the data source, by which data source you want to have this, or you want to filter these rules. For example, for Azure firewall. So how many analytics rules I have for firewall? So these are the different rules for firewall. So several deny actions registered, and then I create the rule based on that. So this is the rule template that is already created by Microsoft security team. And based on that, you can create these rules in the Sentinel. You can set this rule logic that this is the query, and if this query, so there is some issue with the query right now that I need to fix. So I don't want to go into troubleshooting, but this is how we can select a rule template, and then we can define automated response for that, and finally we can review and create this rule. So from the existing templates, we can create a rule. So you have the choice that whether you want to create these analytics rules from existing templates or from scratch according to your requirement. So you can develop your own rules as well. You can search for anything like suspicious consent for an application is provided that is related to Azure Active Directory. I want to create a rule based on that. So select this rule template and create a rule template. Rule template name is suspicious application consent similar to Office 365 attack toolkit, and this is the description. Rule logic is that it will check the logs from audit logs, and then entity mapping. There is some entity mapping conflict right now. You can see the query results. So how many results this query returns, and based on that you can create this rule template. So we have existing rule templates we can use. We also can use the fusion based technology, so multi-stage attacks can be detected. In fact, by default this rule is created and enabled. So you will see a advanced multi-stage attack detection based on fusion technology. So it uses the underlying machine learning, AI and machine learning, and it detects the attacks, multi-stage attacks, and is built on cyber kill chain process. At different stages, there can be different type of attacks. We also can bring the machine learning, and either we can use the Azure's machine learning, Microsoft machine learning, or we can bring our own machine learning as well. So Azure Sentinel supports the integration with Jupyter-based notebooks. And if you want to bring your own machine learning models, Python-based models, or Julia, Python, or R, as you know, Jupyter is the combination of these three languages. So you can bring your own machine learning and you can process this data. Or you can rely on Microsoft's machine learning if you don't have that much engineering in-house. So you can use the UEBA, entity behavioral analytics you can do. And based on the trends, based on the collected data, based on the AI and machine learning that the data is detected, it can generate the incidents. We also can run the scheduled queries on a specific interval. So like I said, that every 5 minutes, every 5 hours, or as you know, per your requirement, you can specify the scheduled queries. These queries have the query logic defined in them, like how frequently it will run, at how many results it will create the alert, and on what alerts, or on a single alert we want an incident, or on multiple alerts we want an incident. We want to suppress the alerts so we can reduce the noise. Based on an alert is generated, so we can use the playbooks to respond to that alert as well. So if the incident is triggered, so a playbook can be executed, which is an Azure Logic app, like I said, and it can remediate or can be used for notification or for any purpose. So earlier I discussed that we have the Sentinel community where we have lots of resources available. If I open that GitHub repository, so you see that GitHub repository is available, which has lots of detection rules, lots of hunting queries in that, lots of playbooks in that. So these are the different directories that I can use. For example, detection rules for the different services. And we have hundreds of rules available over here. For example, for AWS CloudTrail, so these are some detection rules that are created in YAML. So we have these templates and we can bring these templates into Sentinel. Whereas you also can write them from scratch or from the templates. Like I shown you that we have analytics rule templates available. Let's have a look into one of the analytics rule that I have here in place. For an instance, this is MFA disabled for a user. So if the MFA for a user is disabled, so I want that to be resulted into an incident. Now let's have a look into the rule logic, what it is configured with. So this is the name, the ID of the rule that is generated automatically, and the tactic that I'm working on. So this is for credential access. These are the MITRE ATT&CK framework tactics. Severity of this and status is enabled for this rule. The rule logic is the custom query, which will look into the audit logs, and if in the operation name it found that disable strong authentication in the audit trail, if it finds this message, so it will generate some results. And for that, the logic is that if the result is greater than 0, so I need an alert for that. So generate an alert when number of query results is greater than 0, and run the query every 5 minutes. Look up data from the last 1 hour, only in the last 1 hour data. You can configure other settings, and then incident settings you configure. So based on the alert, we want the incident. So create incident from the alert triggered by this analytics rule. If I want to configure an automated response, so I can configure a playbook. For example, this is email notification I have selected. So I want to notify via email that the MFA is disabled. Then I can go with review and create, and then save. Now let's simulate this incident in the Azure Active Directory. So I go to Azure Active Directory and disable the multi-factor authentication of a user. Azure AD users blade. On the top, I have here on the right multi-factor authentication, which launches a page to configure the multi-factor authentication for the Azure AD users, either to enable or disable. I filter the users where the multi-factor authentication is enabled for the users, and this is the user for whom the multi-factor authentication is enabled. I will disable the multi-factor authentication for user Navneet Kumar. Once the authentication is disabled, so an incident will be generated. First of all, an audit log will be generated in the Azure Active Directory. Now there can be some delay between the event generation and event ingestion. That can be of few seconds. So if I go to the audit logs of the Azure Active Directory, so there will be an audit log generated here. In last 24 hours, there is no audit log. I'm expecting one audit log. Once the audit log is generated, then this audit log will be ingested into the workspace, and a playbook will be executed as soon as a incident is generated. That is known as automated threat response. So SIEM and SOAR teams can be inundated with security alerts on a regular basis, and the volume of alerts generated is so huge that available security admins are overwhelmed. This results all too often in situations where many alerts can't be investigated, leaving the organization vulnerable to attack that go unnoticed. So the malicious actors can hide themselves in this traffic. So we need to understand the essence of automatically responding to the threats, and that is something we can do with the automation rules that we can create. We can create the playbooks also. So playbooks use the logic app engine. It's nothing but the logic app, like I said. So Azure Logic App is a cloud service that helps you schedule, automate, orchestrate tasks, business processes, and the workflows. You actually use that as an integration tool to integrate the apps, data systems, services across enterprises or the organizations. If we go to the Sentinel playbook, let's see this incident, this audit log generated here, first of all. So the audit log that disables strong authentication is generated here. If I go back to Sentinel and I show you the playbook, so like I said, the playbook is nothing but a logic app. So you can manage these playbooks under the automation, and you can create the playbooks here. When you create, you have the options to create a new rule or a playbook. So an automation rule or a playbook. So when I click on create a new playbook, so I'm creating nothing but the logic app, as you will notice here. So the Azure portal is launched, and I will create a logic app. In this logic app, there are two important components. Once we create that, I'm not going to create a new one from scratch here, but when we create the playbooks, so there are two important things over there. One is the uh, trigger. What will trigger this logic app? It is a serverless architecture that we use here, and the action. What action will be taken? If I show you my existing playbook in the logic app designer, so what I have done here, I have kept it very short and simple with three steps in it. First is the trigger. So when a Azure Sentinel alert is triggered, so this will trigger the logic app. Then that alerts incident information will be retrieved. And based on that, I have used the Outlook connector to send an email. You can configure these settings by clicking on that. I have drafted an email. Hi Navneet, there is an Azure Sentinel incident with some dynamic content and some static content. This is the title of that. Uh, Title of the incident will become the subject line of the email. You need to create the service connections with these different services. Like we discussed that the Azure Logic apps are used to integrate the services across the enterprises or the organizations. So this is an integration tool. With my analytics rule, this playbook was available. Now, if I check that whether this incident of uh, strong authentication disabled is ingested into the Sentinel workspace, because we're using the connection, Azure AD connection, to collect this data. So if I do audit logs, and this audit log I do in, I just run the existing query, somehow it's not completing the, it's not using the autocomplete. So in the last 24 hours, there are some audit logs generated. And these are some of them related to user management. Earlier, there was no audit log. So all the three audit logs are ingested into the Sentinel, and one of them is to disable strong authentication. That means that my analytics rule configured here will generate some result. And as per the analytics rule, if there is greater than zero result, so it will generate an alert, and the alert will create an incident. So here I have active rules 7, and the rule was MFA disabled for a user. So if I select this rule and I edit that once again to show you this query, so we can have a look into the query results also, that whether this query returns any result or not. So the custom query written here will return some results. So you can view the query results and you can see that whether there is some result based on this query. So let the query be executed. The time frame defined is custom, and that is the last 1 hour that we are testing in. And there is one result based on that. And the alert rule was configured that if there is more than zero result, then make it an incident. But that is configured to run every 5 minutes. So I may need to wait for a few more minutes to see the incident here. These are some other incidents, suspicious granting. The other incidents I can see here. You can also enable the auto refresh to see all the incidents. You also can use the criterion filter, like what type of incidents you want to see. So you want to see by severity, by the status, maybe only the active or the new instances. You don't want to see the closed instances. So you can use the criterion filters on the dashboard here. Azure Logic app is used for integration. Hundreds of ready-to-use connectors are available, including the Outlook 365, Dynamics, Salesforce, BizTalk, SAP, Oracle, DB, file shares, and Facebook, Twitter, Yammer, Slack. So we have uh, more than 300 API connections or connectors available for the Logic app that we can use to integrate these Logic apps to integrate the services. That is Azure Logic app. Every Logic app workflow starts with a trigger, and we have Azure Sentinel trigger, which can trigger a Logic app, and as per the Logic app's workflow, the operations will be performed. This brings to the end of this presentation, and let's validate the incident before we conclude. Here we go. So the incident is created, and that is MFA disabled for a user. I also can now investigate into this incident, and I can create the triage, and I can get the answer of my questions from this. So I can investigate that this is for Navneet Kumar, and if there are other events like that, so that we also can investigate into. So this is the information, the UPN suffix of the user, and related alerts, host, and more, like office activities by IP. So you can run these queries also to get the other results or answers of your questions. This was the MFA disabled for a user. If I check the email, my playbook must have triggered. So Azure Sentinel, and if we look into the playbook, this was the automation, and under the automation, there was playbook. And if I look into the playbook, whether it is executed or not, so I go to the overview of this, and it was executed and it succeeded at 10:14 my time. Succeeded, and let's see the Logic app run history. So this is the run, and each trigger or the connector in it was successfully done. It took 2 seconds for getting the incident details and 4 seconds to fire an email. If I check the email, so at 10:14, this incident took place. So I got an email, and that is MFA disabled for a user. And this is kind of neat. And there is an Azure Sentinel incident. Incident description is multi-factor authentication helps prevents credential compromise. And that is incident severity, which is medium. So however you want to draft your email or your messages, you can use the different connectors, email connectors you want to use. You want to use Teams, Microsoft Teams, or Slack, or you want to open the tickets, so you want to use ServiceNow, Jira, or anything else. So you can use the different services and integrate with them using these tools and using the Logic app. So this brings to the end of this presentation on Azure Sentinel. Microsoft has not announced a dedicated program for Azure Sentinel, but there is SE200 program, another program that is recently introduced and in the beta mode. That is for the security operations. I have created a customized Azure Sentinel training that you can register for, and you can perform the day-to-day operations on Azure Sentinel. So you will get the Azure Sentinel repository. Where from you can perform all the labs. I believe I changed my password, and it should be this one with 8 labs. This. Okay, I need to recover my account, and I don't want to take into that. So this brings to the end of the presentation. If you guys have any questions so far, your questions are appreciated. You can let me know. So we will leave the last 10 minutes for the question answer. As far as the licensing requirements for Sentinel is concerned, so in cloud, we have two type of licensing. One is the per user subscription based licenses and licensing, and the second one is pay per use. So Sentinel goes with pay per use. So as much as data you ingest, you will be charged for them, and depending on the retention period, you will be charged. Like I said, that 90 days retention is completely free. As far as the Kubernetes integration with Azure Sentinel is concerned, of course we can do that, because in the Kubernetes service we have the integration option with log analytics workspace for monitoring purpose. So that also can be integrated. There can be some use cases you want to monitor the data, the events at the Kubernetes,